Well, let me just start by thanking everyone for coming. I think your willingness to be here on an evening, no matter which time zone you are, no matter what role you are, just shows your commitment to Mortarboard. And obviously, we're all here as members and advisors who have been selected for our accomplishments of scholarship, leadership, and service. But we know it's been really hard the past few years on campuses. So I also hope you can look around the room and see you're not alone. And again, it's all different types of institutions that are having some both similar challenges and sometimes unique challenges. And this is our second session that we did. We had some others join us on Sunday. And again, this is just for fall selection. So know you're not alone, but know that we're here to support you both from the national office level, but really your section coordinators. I mean, Kaylee's a great example, but we have just truly outstanding section coordinators. And our goal is to help you reinvigorate on campus, get to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. And we're going to go through some step-by-steps that feel really tactical, but I also don't want any of you to feel like you can't ask questions or interrupt. But also some of you have probably done things that have worked really well. Feel free to share it with the group. If you've done things that didn't seem to work well, feel free to share it with the group as well. I will always say one of the best benefits of Mortarboard is the connection to everybody else across the nation, right? It's so rarely, especially to our college students, get to have this membership in a society that spans coast to coast, all different types of majors, all different types of students, all different types of institutions. So we also want to leverage the talent within our society as well, because it's a very talented bunch. So I'm gonna just kind of move through. And Kaylee, I was going to connect with Kaylee, so this is on me. I was going to see if she wanted to take more of the lead, but I didn't ask her that in advance. So I also don't want to put her on the spot. So I'll kind of start, but Kaylee, feel free to just kick me out whenever and share as much as you can. But we tried to put together 10 steps, right? Round numbers always feels good. Technically, I feel like I combined 2 of them. It should have been 11, but that didn't sit right. So 10 steps as to how to plan a successful fall selection. And I know a few of you are already in this process. I know Bowling Green, for example, I've already received your candidate request form for this fall. So I know people are in various places. Something for those of you that have been around for maybe a little bit longer or have heard more about Mortarboard is we have for the past probably decade, we spent a lot of time focusing on selection, right? Even the name of this session, kind of 10 steps to a successful fall selection. I'm trying to change the semantics a little bit because when you start with selection, you're missing 3 incredibly important steps before you can select. Select assumes we have the students kind of knocking down our door saying, let me in, let me in, let me in. And we know that's not always the case, and that's easier said than done. So we want to really backtrack and look at how we plan, how we recruit, how we promote, even the way we collect our applications and or nominations, right? And then we get to the selection piece and then kind of the steps that fall after that, a little bit more orderly into place, some more specific than others. So that being said, I think the best thing to do is to plan and think about as your chapter. If your chapter has been working on their chapter action plan, maybe this conversation's already come up, but thinking about everything from what size of a class do you want to bring in the spring to how many do you want to try to bring in this fall to supplement what maybe came in last spring, right? Or how many do you want to bring in this fall because you didn't bring in a spring class? Or maybe it's you want to bring students in this fall to just have more physical human capacity to do some really awesome events, service projects, other things on campus, and you want to bolster your numbers. So everybody has a different reason for wanting to select students this time around, but thinking more about what does that actually look like? How many people are we actually talking about, right? But you can't, we could magically say we want to bring in 20 members, but again, then it's thinking about, okay, so how do we find these 20 members? How do we promote ourselves? How do we recruit members to join Mortarboard? And I think part of that, and hopefully you'll see some different messaging coming out from the national office, down a little bit down the road, we're working on a campaign right now, kind of some membership campaign. But students, and some of you students probably are nodding along. There's a piece where everybody's overcommitted, right? There's so many opportunities to get engaged on campus. So what differentiates Mortarboard, right? What is our differentiator? And I think we could all probably come up with some really good things having been in it. Again, for me, it's this network of Mortarboards all across the country that are like-minded with their commitments to academics and scholarship and to leadership and service-minded individuals, right? Really bright, smart, hardworking, talented, interesting people. And I love still to this day getting to know them, right? So that's a differentiator for me. That might not be what sets you necessarily feel is your differentiator. It could be the opportunity to meet new friends on campus. It could be the opportunity to get to know some really great faculty advisors. We know that power of a faculty mentor to undergraduates makes such a difference in a student's life, right? Maybe that's kind of one of the motivations. So think about what is that value that students are going to get from joining Mortarboard, especially in comparison to the other opportunities they have on campus, right? Yet alone, once you're a member, you're always a member. I'm hiring for a couple of positions right now. Obviously, if they have Mortarboard experience, I look to that. That makes a lot of sense because I work for Mortarboard. But I hired a Mortarboard, it's hard to say a lot fast. In my previous position, before I worked here, somebody had it on their resume. And I'll admit, I went ding, ding, ding. Somebody's already vetted them, right? I already know that they care about their academics. They must be a hard worker. They show leadership skills. They're service-minded. So that stays with you in lots of different ways as well. So thinking about, again, what is the differentiator? What is the value we add? And then how do you push that back out to the community? And ideally, this is a really multi-tier process, but it doesn't have to be difficult, right? So even if you're a chapter that's selected in the spring and maybe only had 5 members, I could probably guarantee that those 5 members are involved in at least 15 different organizations, majors, campus jobs between them, right? There's probably 15 unique touch points that those 5 members have. And I would wager a guess that it could be higher. But if everybody just reached out to 3 of their unique touch points with a message, maybe they went to a residence hall meeting, maybe it's an email, maybe it's a academic listserv that the administrative assistant helps to send out. If each of those 5 people reached out to 3, all of a sudden you'd have 15 different groups of students that could hear the message. And 3 might feel very easy to accomplish, right? Now, I know some of you are in chapters that didn't do a spring selection, and so that might be a little bit harder. Maybe there are some continuing seniors that are still around, or maybe there's not, and that could mean you're the only faculty advisor and the only person that's sort of moving it forward. But then thinking about who are some of your connections and colleagues, or are there even students that you would not only recommend to apply, but then could then maybe also help spread the word. And maybe you use that you tier down to them to spread it out a little bit, right? And then it's the gaining the visibility. Fall, it's a little harder because it's a truncated time period. So you don't have as long to plan. So this might need to be a little bit faster. But is there a place that you could set up a table at lunchtime in the student union? Or is there somewhere that makes sense for you to hand out materials or just kind of promote Mortarboard? Again, that might be a little bit harder given it's already the middle of October. And it might make more sense to do those going to a meeting or sending a listserv. So I think those are 2 big steps that we forget to talk about when we talk about selection. And I wanted to make sure that we put some intentional emphasis on that. Kaylee, what have I missed?
I don't think too much. I mean, just get as visible as you possibly can on campus right now. That's kind of the word that I've been using a lot recently is visibility on campus. Any way that you can do that, whether it's reaching out to assist at another group's event, if there's somebody in your chapter that's involved in an event that they need assistance with, that they need people to work at, if the theater program is is doing a presentation or a play or something and they need people to hand out programs, like just get visible, wear your Mortarboard t-shirt, wear your pin, hand out a pamphlet. That's where you're going to get the most good right now, is just to be out on campus, even if there are just a few of you. there's strength in numbers. So get as many people as you can out on campus, you know, getting that name out there. And this is a great time to reach out to your alumni that are in the area, whether they're from the chapter that's a part of the campus there, or if they come from somewhere else and they live nearby. Mortarboard alumni are typically really willing to help. That's what I'm doing. So reach out to them, utilize them, say, hey, would you be willing to come to campus during homecoming and, you know, stand at a table and tell people how great your experience with mortarboard was? That's, I think, an underutilized option for a lot of chapters. They think they have to do it all themselves, and you don't. That's what we're here for.
So again, I'm going to put emphasis on the why mortarboard, and I mentioned this in the talking about the planning and the recruitment, because again, it's hard to just tell people to join something when it feels very vague as to what it might be. And so I brainstormed just some of the benefits of membership that we talk a lot about, but I would love if you have other suggestions as we're going through, maybe kind of put them in the chat. If you either, you know, from your own experience, I know maybe you haven't been in it for very long, so you might still be saying, I don't actually know the benefits yet. That's probably why we're struggling. I just sort of was told to apply and I applied and now I'm here. But think about what could be some of the benefits and feel free to put them in the chat. I love these two pictures. They're a more recent conference and then one of the very first conferences. And so again, we've been an organization for over 100 years. And I think one of the things that's sometimes harder to explain is, you know, we've got this rich history and tradition, right? We were founded as all women. There's a reason it appears that there's a lot of women represented on tonight's call. We tend to still lean that way, but we were founded as all women when women didn't have the opportunity to join male societies. And that advocating for underrepresented groups has always also been core to Mortarboard's mission, which I personally think is really cool. And so we've got this 104 years of tradition, but we're also at a place where we're moving forward, right? And so we're not only a capstone to a collegiate experience, but we're a launching pad to what comes after college. And right, I came out of the career development world for a while, and you know, I could tell you that most jobs that you land are based on some sort of connection. Even knowing where to go to graduate school, right? It's usually working with a faculty member. They give you some advice. They have faculty colleagues at other places, right? It's connections. So much about how we move forward after college is about connections. And Mortarboard provides you with, I mean, a couple 100,000 connections potentially right away, right? That might be an exaggeration. You don't get to know everyone, but those connections are there. And lifelong opportunities for continued personal and professional development. It doesn't end the day you graduate from college, which again, I think is really special. But feel free to put other things in the chat. I'm going to actually see if others have some good ideas for how to collect applications and nominations. This is an area that I wouldn't say is tricky, but we like to provide guidance. And there's some guidance in the bylaws more for how you select. But we really keep a lot of the application nomination piece up to the chapters because we really want to make sure you're doing what works for you on your campus. Now, sometimes that makes it a little bit more overwhelming because you're like, I don't really know what works best for us. So I can say, you know, some tips would be not to overcomplicate it, right? Reach out to faculty and administration to either ask them to nominate students or to send the application on. I would say we have a lot of chapters that used to do nomination only, and we have seen that going away a little bit more, I think in part for good reason. A lot of our faculty and staff, they're also really busy and it's hard for them to spend the time nominating students, especially if they're not even sure if the students would be interested, into an organization when they're also writing letters of recommendation and advising and teaching an extra load of classes. You know, and so I think there's a little bit of a pull away from nominations and doing more self-nominations, right, which is technically application. But even if you just do an application, you still want to make sure students hear about it. So you still want to ask people to forward the information and make it as easy as possible. Put together a quick email intro, pass it off to, again, those 15 different unique audiences from 5 different members that are then going with a really easy application, that you want it to have a little bit of effort, right? Because you want to make sure you're selecting high achieving students, but you don't want to put up so many barriers that they look at it and see that it's going to take them 3.5 hours to complete and they choose not to do it. And so really finding kind of that balance. I can let you know what we absolutely need from a national office perspective to be able to have membership is, right, their full name and email, ideally a second non-campus email, because we know a lot of campus emails kind of roll away when they graduate, a permanent address, because again, people don't live in their campus address more than 1 year, a phone number. And then this is where it's a little bit more, I guess it's also objective, right? So academic credentials, we do have minimum standards in our bylaws, and then chapters can make those more stringent, and many chapters do. So hopefully you all have copies of your bylaws and the national bylaws. The national ones are pretty easily found on the website, but if you can't find them, I'm happy to share. And then if for some reason you can't find your chapter bylaws, let us know, and hopefully somebody submitted one recently and we can find it and send it back out to you. And then you want to obviously make sure that students have demonstrated service and demonstrated leadership. The way you find that out could be short answers. It could be, they attach a resume and some short answer to a question. Really, we want to leave that up to you. But again, I think especially for fall, a little bit more simple might be better, because part of the goal is also just to get your membership back up, right? If we, I remember, and I'm not going to say which organization, but I have an organization I worked with before within Mortarboard, and their chapter used to get 150, 200 applications. This past year, the advisor was telling me they got 25, right? So if you have 150 applications, you have room to be more selective, right? If you have 25, you don't want to take people that aren't deserving, but you probably don't need to be as selective. And so think about where you are now and know that that can change for the future. And so what worked 10 years ago might not work today. That being said, also make the submissions as easy as possible. Instead of it being a PDF that they have to print out or write things in or upload it back in, can you be a Google form or a Jot form or something that's really accessible that they can submit right away. And I'm going to let Kaylee talk about tapping when we get there, but she has some good ideas also for things you may want to collect. So when you go and tap the member, you've got a little bit more information.
Yeah, definitely. The little short biography is always a good thing to ask for when you're collecting applications and nominations, but we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to tapping.
And so with that, there's selection, and we do have Kaylee linked to the membership selection handbook on the slide. So when we forward these, you'll have those, but they're also under the resources. Again, it's selection by consensus, which is the preferred method of at least 80% approval. Now I want to give the caveat that you may have taken members in the spring that ended up, they may have paid their dues, but they haven't been active. You don't need to include them in your consensus. So you want it to be consensus of active members. So again, that's a little bit subjective as to how you define active members as a chapter, but a conversation in that planning process you might want to have. And again, we talked a little bit about the bylaws and then what the candidates should embody. So that's what you'll be selecting the students on. And then it goes into the logistics of that. After you select your students, you will fill out, this is sort of the boring detail-oriented part, you will fill out the candidate request form. And if you haven't seen it before, it's good practice to be able to do it for spring, because you'll do it again in the spring. And this is where you put all that candidate information in. So on one of the tabs, it'll tell you everything that you need for the institution, including kind of class size, percentage of eligible students, like you're going in, what your GPA or your academic standards are per your chapter, where you want membership certificates sent, usually in an advisor's office, sometimes the president's house or membership chair's apartment, but somewhere where it's most likely to be able to be received and not get lost out in the rain or sat on a doorstep. Other information about the members, then including the student's full name, all that contact information, because that's what we use to import them into membership. Because remember, we're a society, not just an honor. So it's not just, great, you check all these boxes, we congratulate you, we honor you. It's you're joining as a member to a society for life. And so that membership piece is important. And that's why we need a lot of that information. Grades is a really depends on your chapter or your institution, I mean, as to how to determine if the students meet the academic requirements. And this is where faculty advisors in particular can be really helpful. Because in an ideal world, what you would do at one point is you would go to the registrar's office and say, we need a list of eligible students who are senior by credit hour. So again, they could be sophomores or juniors as long as they have rising senior credit hour, and that they need to meet these academic credentials. So based on your bylaws, a GPA minimum and or a percentage rank of class. You do not need to know what those students' GPAs are. I know a lot of schools are very hesitant for good reason of giving students other students' GPAs. So even though we're an academic-based society that has a GPA minimum, usually what the registrar will do is just send you a list of the names of the people who are eligible without any identifiable GPA information. You can ask students to self-report. They can choose to not disclose if they want, but that is still a method. But remember, Mortar Board is also only one of probably many honor societies that are on your campus, right? Your campus probably also has, maybe a history honor society or Phi Beta Kappa or something else. So we're also not so unique. There are other organizations that are selecting members based on grades. And so they should be able to work with you. Sometimes it's just how you approach asking the registrar for that information. Because oftentimes on first request, they might think, I'm not giving you students GPAs. That's no way. But again, there's precedent that has been set somewhere on campus already. And ideally, that's where an advisor could be really helpful in figuring out what that precedent is. So that's a little bit about, so you'll then, ideally, you've got that list. So you already know that they're academically eligible, and then you submit the CR. The national office does approve it. We are not going to necessarily go student by student and decide if we think they're worthy of membership or not. That is not our role. You as the chapter have selected them. Our trust is in you, especially if with the advisor kind of sign off that they need academic credentials. We really just use the submission to double check spelling and making sure the emails seem correct, because that's how we enter them in the membership database. It's also how we print certificates. So if we saw the name Melissa and it had 4 S's instead of 2, I'd probably reach back out and say, hey, just want to make sure that this name is spelled correctly, right? It's just another double checking. And then we'll officially approve it. And we need to have a little bit of time to read it and approve it before you tap your members. Before we get onto that, one of the other things that sometimes tricks people up is on that first tab, we do ask you those dates. When are you going to tap? And when do you plan to initiate your members? Because there's a cadence of events that has to happen. And the worst thing I could do is ruin the surprise for your students, where we send an email welcoming them from the national office and teach them how to log in to their member portal, and they haven't been tapped yet and they didn't know they were selected, right? So that's why those dates are really important. And then also we want to make sure we get your membership certificates to the campus before you have initiation, so that we're not saying, oh, sorry, you're initiated, but your PIN and your certificate are in the mail. So that's why those dates are also really important, so we can stay organized. So that's what you'd submit to our office. And then Kaylee, if you'll want to take it from here for a little bit with the tapping.
Of course. So tapping, this is something that's extremely unique to Mortar Board. It's our way of, telling candidates that they've been selected for membership. Hopefully you were all tapped in some way. I know the past 2 years with COVID and not being able to be in person has really affected our chapters and their ability to publicly tap candidates and make it as important and grandiose as it has been traditionally for mortarboard. Personally, when I was tapped, one of my fellow sorority sisters came into one of my accounting classes and read that biography that I submitted with my application in front of all my classmates and told them that I was being selected to join an organization on campus that was made up of those that valued scholarship, leadership, and service, and had, placed those things as their highest priorities. And it made me feel really special. And I was really honored to have gotten that in front of my peers and my professor. So that's something that mortarboard really encourages you to do is tap in person. Now, if you can't physically do it, if it's absolutely impossible, say a member is studying abroad, we don't expect you to get on a plane and fly to another country to tap them in person, no matter how cool that would be. Feel free to tap them over Zoom or with a YouTube video or something like that. We understand that there are always, there are going to be some barriers sometimes, but if you absolutely can, get to those people when they're in front of others, whether that is tapping them in class, tapping them at a meeting for an organization or a club that they're a part of, or even asking them to meet you at a certain spot on campus, say in front of a library or in front of a historical monument on your campus or something like that, somewhere that a lot of people know about at a time of day when there will be people around, and do it there. It's really a cool thing that mortarboard does to tell people in person that they're being selected. Now, if you're going to tap in class, please get in touch with the instructor ahead of time and ask permission to come into their class and what time would be best. We just want to make sure that we're keeping good relationships with those instructors so that hopefully they'll continue to nominate people if they're being asked to do so, and that they understand that mortarboard is something that's worthwhile. Same with a meeting or an event for a club or an organization. Get in touch with their president or their advisor just to make sure that you're showing up at a time that's okay with the group. I know, being in a Greek society myself, our meetings were private and not allowed to be attended by outside people. So if somebody wanted to come in, there were things that weren't done ahead of time so that they could come in and speak to our chapter. So just be cognizant of that. And it's a great way. There are traditions to each chapter on how they tap. Like I mentioned with COVID, some of those traditions have gone by the wayside. So if you don't know what the traditions your chapter held were, this is another time a great resource is your alumni. Reach out to them. They were tapped by their chapter, by your chapter, so they know. So if you reach out to them and say, hey, how are you tapped? What are the traditions here? How can we bring this back? That's another way to get them involved and to bring that tradition back to your chapter if they haven't been able to do it.
Can I just add two things? I think that's so right. And if for some reason you struggle to find alumni or they don't even respond, this is a time to make a fun new tradition, right? That's the other thing. And it gives you that creativity, and that could be something that's fun for the current chapter to think through. How do you want to sort of make an impact or a splash? I can tell you, with one of the schools I worked at, we had a flagpole on campus, kind of right outside of the meet and green outside the Union. And the flagpole was a common meeting place, whether it was protests or big events or something else. And so they invited everybody to come to the flagpole on a certain day and time. And it would get and they did it around the lunch hour, and it would get a lot of traffic. Or they had a common hour. There was one week where there was a common hour, so they did it at that time. And there's a lot of traffic though, walking back and forth. And so they kind of made a big production out of it. If you do tap in class, I always say it's good to let your members know, maybe on the application or after you confirm that you received it. We will be tapping selected members the week of November 4th in classes. It doesn't mean that they're getting in. It doesn't mean that they know that they're getting tapped, but that way it also encourages them to go to class, because you also don't want to show up at a class and they happen to sleep in that day. And so if they know that, oh, I might be tapped for this since I applied, I want to make sure, now that I know that they're going to come to all the classes, I'm going to make sure that I'm there. So just a suggestion. And then I'll take this part because some of this is back to the official welcome. So the national office will then use, based on your tapping dates, we will send an email to the students who were tapped, ideally about the day after, So if you know you don't get through all the students by the date you're going to complete tapping, let us know, because again, we don't want to ruin it. So we will send an email to all the students, congratulating them, welcoming them from the national office, as well as how they log in and then pay their national and or local dues. So the way the dues work, so the national dues are $80, which, you know, I know in today's age can be hard when college students only have so much money. So also know that we have gift memberships. Every chapter gets one gift membership through a generous endowment per selection cycle. Now, if you have more than one student who could benefit from a gift membership, please, please, please reach out. Again, this is where we have alumni, other donors. Nobody ever wants to be the $80 membership dues to stand in the way of a member joining Mortarboard. Okay, so please kind of keep us posted with that. And I will also just counter and say $80 is actually compared to other honor societies. We did a little analysis and we're actually a little bit lower. And if you think about kind of this professional association aspect, $80 is kind of a steal for all of the different programming that we offer throughout the year as well. Then each individual chapter can also choose to collect local dues. Okay. And some chapters don't, because they already recognize, gosh, $80 is really high. We have a lot of first generation students. We don't want to put more financial burden on them. We're going to just keep it at the 80. That makes sense. However, you will then probably need to fundraise more than other chapters, right? Because you're still going to want funds to retain with the chapter, whether it's for room rental or to have pizza for a party or to buy regalia for members at the end of the year or to pay your conference dues and travel. So kind of keep that in mind. And that's one reason why we have the budgeting piece on the cap that you've either turned in or are working on, so you can think through what are other expenses that might come up, because we don't want you to then be surprised and be like, oh wait, now we can't send anybody to conference because we didn't fundraise and we didn't bring in local dues, right? A lot of chapters use their local dues to apply to conference, for example. So some are really high, some are really low. I've seen them range from $5 for local dues to $50 of local dues. I would say the average chapter is somewhere right around the $20, $25. 20 is nice because it rounds out to an even $100 membership between the local and the national. Now we can collect the dues, and I told you there's going to be some boring parts of logistics, but we can collect the dues in one of two ways, technically three ways. So one, they can pay their national dues and their local dues through the online portal that Mortarboard sets up for them. So when they log in with their unique username, which is their email, which is again why we need to make sure it's spelled correctly, and password, they will then have the option to accept membership, and they can both pay their national dues and their local dues. If that's the way we collect the dues, then we will mail you a check for your local dues once the membership acceptance period has ended. So you'll get that money as a check back to the chapter to use as you wish. The other option is the chapter can collect both the national and local dues and then send the national office a check for the national dues, okay, or a credit card. Sometimes they use a university card for that. So that would be a second option, is having the money come to the chapters. We're finding each year more and more chapters just go to pay online because students don't have cash, they don't have checks. They could Venmo, but chapters aren't set up to Venmo because they have to be linked to a personal account. So typically students like to join online and they can just put in a credit card number. Some even use their mom or dad's credit card number, for example. But that is an option that you collect the dues. And then some chapters do a combination where we collect the national dues and then they collect the local dues. So they send the members online and say, pay your $80 to the national, but then give us $20. I would say that's probably more confusing for the new member, and that's the best way for membership not to get tracked correctly or to fully join. So I would advise you against doing that way. But if that's what works, by all means, we also don't want to stand in your way. But that's the way that the dues process works. And that is important because students who have not yet paid their dues should not get their PIN or their certificate at initiation as a chapter president or advisor, you would want to hold on to those until they've paid their dues. So we also want to make sure there's enough time turnaround between membership and not. Now, sometimes if they show up to initiation, you can assume they're most likely going to pay their dues. And that's really up to you. We're not going to track you down and say, did you actually give them their certificate? Because we also don't want to discourage them. So I think that's a case by case basis that by all means, you should feel free to see what works. But then, so that's the national office part. But I think it's really important right away to engage them from the current chapter leadership. And Kaylee, I know you have some really good examples there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as part of, becoming a part of the society, it's always really nice for those members to feel included right away. So along with the email from the national office, your chapter leadership, whether it's the president or the executive board as a whole, from an organization email, if you have one on campus, should be sending out an email to those new members to, first of all, to welcome them again, since not everybody's always present at all of the tappings, to introduce the executive officers, let them know the important dates. Again, if if they received it at tapping, maybe they lost that paper or put it somewhere and they don't remember, but just remind them of that initiation date and time of any chapter meetings, even before initiation. Make them feel welcome, invite them to come to the chapter meetings or to any events that you're having or attending as a chapter. Make them feel included. Let them know about their orientation meeting or event that you're throwing, which we'll talk about here shortly. And start already to outline the leadership opportunities that they could have within Mortar Board as an executive offer or as a committee chairperson. Let them know to start thinking about those kinds of things, because the more the time that they have to think about those kinds of things, the more likely they are to get excited about them and want to take those positions, as opposed to getting thrown in at the last minute or getting a position and not knowing kind of what they're doing or what they're expected to do. As I know a lot of people have said that they've felt, in the past couple of years. So you just want to make sure that they feel welcomed, and that's going to build loyalty and pride in your chapter. And that's only going to do good things for the future, because if they feel that loyalty and pride, that gets passed along to new members in years to come as they're tapping them in and welcoming them in, because as they feel welcome, they will welcome others. And that kind of leads into orientation a little bit. So for your new members, it's always a great idea to host some kind of orientation, either meeting or event. Like I said, this will inspire them and get them to buy into the chapter and have that loyalty and pride in Mortar Board. It will also bond them as a class. A lot of these students, from bigger schools, they've never met some of the people that they're in Mortar Board with, because they're in different majors and different, divisions of the school or something like that. So it's going to give them that time to form those friendships if they've never met people before. And that's what's going to really, bond the chapter together and keep it going. Orientation is a great time to share information about Mortar Board nationally, as well as your local chapter, the ideals, the traditions that you hold, and your major projects and events that you do throughout the year, so that they know for next year what they're going to be responsible for planning and executing. I always suggest food. I know you're college students. Food is a great way to get people to come to things. I loved food. I went to events with food all the time in college. I still go to events where they offer me food. So tell me there's free food and I will be there. So even if it's just, hey, we're going to go grab coffee together before this meeting, or we're having pizza, I highly, highly recommend it. And then after that orientation piece, you're going to move not straight into initiation, give them a little time to breathe, but you're going to have that initiation event. And this is the big thing. This is the great thing about Mortar Board is the initiation ceremony. There's a lot of tradition that's steeped in the initiation ceremony. And each chapter can make it their own. There are things that you can do to make it unique to your chapter, but a lot of it is very similar. And if you haven't done one in person or seen one, there are a lot of resources through the Mortar Board website that you can use, YouTube videos and things like that, that will help you kind of get back to that in-person initiation ceremony. We did want to mention too that the national office is really helping you out with fall selection and initiation here. The national office is going to do a virtual initiation on December 4th for any members that wish to participate. So if you don't have time to plan an initiation ceremony for your fall selected members, you can utilize this as that initiation to kind of help you out as you're kind of dual planning for fall and spring selection.
And let me just chime in there. By all means, if you are able and have the bandwidth to do an initiation yourself and in person, I think that's really, really great. So this is not, we're not saying you should do this instead of, it's really just to complement it or supplement it if you can't, especially for fall. We know it can be really difficult given it's already the middle of October, and if you're trying to get members in now and again in the spring. And then we could always do the initiation online, and then you could have them kind of do, they'd still be able to enjoy the ceremonial aspect in the spring if you did that back in person. We also know that some campuses still have restrictions for in-person events and gathering. So we didn't want people to not be able to have the opportunity to have an initiation. So, you know, if you do a fall selection, we'll kind of gather those who want to take part in it, and we'll still make it really nice. We'll still mail certificates and pins to the point of contact on that campus and ask them to disseminate them to the new members. But, and we figured we'll see if it works. And if it works, we may continue to do it in the spring as well, because we know there were some chapters in the spring, I think a couple of people even on here, that never actually had their initiation. So we want to make sure people formally get initiated. Okay. Oh, so then it's back to more paperwork. So the good news is this paperwork is actually not, it's the same paperwork that you already submitted. So that candidate request spreadsheet, there's a couple of different tabs. So again, one is where you put all the member information, and one is where you put some of the chapter information. After you've had initiation and you know who are the new members, you will submit that form back with if they refused membership or if they paid their membership and joined. At the same time, this is probably more for next year. If there are continuing seniors, you would want to add them here as well, so we can make sure that we're just tracking them. So it's the same spreadsheet you already turned in. It's just a new tab, but it's really important for us to get this, because that's how we then know the actual roster. Because while we'd love to think that if we selected 20 members, all members join, oftentimes there's some attrition. And so we want to make sure that we have captured who the actual members are. So it should be pretty easy. And then, you know, I think Kaylee actually already covered most of this. And so, but it's important enough that we wanted to make sure it's listed as a step. So step 10 is to engage those new members. Because again, we've talked about the benefits of Mortar Board, and we want to make sure they're seeing those benefits right away, because we pride ourselves on being a society, not just an honor that you get to check off on your resume. And so thinking again about how you find great activities to do, how you support those new members, you know, are they in an a cappella group? So you show up to their a cappella concert and cheer them on. What can you do just for fun as well as a group? You know, and thinking about those things, because as somebody who was initiated 26 years ago, I still connect with my class. And even though I was a senior and had all of my affinity groups already on campus, this was one of the first times I was with really completely a full group of really interesting, smart people. And I knew some of them, but there were so many I hadn't known, right? And you think, especially if you're a leader on campus to the point where you get into Mortar Board, you might think, I know a lot of people. I've got my friends, I've got my network. And then you join this, and what an opportunity it can provide you, that not only while you're in college, but then again beyond. And so I think that bonding is really important. And I know it can be hard because you're also in mortar board because you're really busy. You've done a lot of things, but I definitely encourage you to find the time because I think you'll be really pleasantly surprised with how close you can become to some new people in your last year or so of college. So that's kind of the presentation. So let me stop sharing, and we want to make sure that we can answer questions in the last bit of time. Let me just add in one thing that I forgot to mention in the recruitment section. So, and I don't know, so 2 years ago at the national conference, so unless any of you are a continuing senior, Mortar Board passed a resolution and created a standing committee for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, it's always been something that's been in our mission since the beginning when we talked about advancing particularly the status of women in higher education. And so it's been an underlying kind of foundation, but not publicly stated as so until 2 years ago. So the mission changed. You now see it on our website. We have a standing committee. And something that we think is really important is also to diversify our membership. And there is a DEI guidebook on the website as well. And I would encourage you to think through how, right, your DEI initiatives could also be how do you recruit a more diverse Class 2 Mortar Board. So if you're filling out your chapter action plan, or if you did, you'll see that there's a section that asks you about kind of a connection on campus as a DEI contact. What might you want to do? It doesn't have to be a program. It doesn't have to be an event, especially like we don't want to pretend we're the experts necessarily, but we do think it's a really important opportunity to diversify the members that are coming into Mortar Board. And so that could be your DEI initiative for the year, is to diversify the chapter. And so working with who are the specific organizations on campus, who are the units, administrators on campus, so the name that you listed in your CAP, right? Reaching out to them and saying, hey, we really would love to get some more members. Do you have some listservs that you could help send it to? Or is there a student organization meeting that I could come and talk to students? So I think I forgot to mention that earlier.
I've got a question about tapping. So Mortar Board kind of went away because of COVID on my campus, and I was never tapped in person, and nobody in Mortar Board so far has been. So I like, and we really want to tap in person because we think that's a great way to show like visibility at Mortar Board. But what, like when we're tapping in class or at clubs, what would we say during the tapping process?
There is actually a script
Ooh, okay.
in the handbook on the website that just kind of gives you a rough outline. Basically, just have the Mortar Board member like introduce themselves first off, say that they're a member of Mortar Board, kind of give a brief overview of what Mortar Board is, and then talk about the candidate and kind of the high level why they are getting tapped into Mortar Board and why this is such a big deal for them to be selected. Those are the high points to hit. You don't want to talk for like 10 or 15 minutes. Should be just kind of a quick thing. A lot of chapters will give something. I know I got a Mortar Board medallion when I was tapped. Some chapters do roses, some chapters do scrolls, because that's kind of our symbols, is the cap in the Mortar Board and the scroll. So something like that, just to kind of embody that whole passing. Or some chapters even like will tap the member on the shoulder while they're tapping them. So it's kind of that physical embodiment of tapping somebody into the society. So there are a lot of different ways you can do it, but that's the general idea.
Okay, thank you so much. And you said it was in the membership selection handbook?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And we did not provide our members with medallions at that time, but we did a scroll and we actually printed a copy of The Torch, which is the poem. And so we rolled that up with a ribbon and kind of handed it to them. And I think we actually recited at least the first verse of The Torch as well when we did it. That was kind of one of the things that we stepped in to do. So you have to feel comfortable kind of in front of people reading, a poem from Mortar Board, but I think it's really nice. And right? And the message in the torch is, passing the torch on to them, and they are now the bearer that other people will follow. And so there's a sentimental value to it as well. We technically have a tapping song also. It's new since I have been a member or an advisor, and I actually thought my team last year was playing a joke on me when they started singing it, because we tapped one of the members in the office, and I'm like, oh, that's really clever. Like, you just wrote a funny song. And like, no, it's our official song. So at some point we passed an official song. I don't sing publicly in front of others. I would read the poem instead, but there is also lyrics and notes to the song in the resources.
Really,
We also
Michaela,
recorded it.
it's been my dream. Like every year when we get through pick, I'm like, okay, we're gonna sing. Can we like put robes on and march the campus? But I want to process to graduation. Like I want to put all the gear on and walk around in it all the time. So nobody ever wants to do that in 105 degrees or 40-mile-an-hour winds or anything out here. I know people can come and go. I would say as a faculty member, if somebody read the torch, I would start looking at my watch. And we do tap in class. Traditionally, we don't always. We actually divide those responsibilities up at pick. And we used to have it as part of the application. These days, it's a lot easier just to get somebody's schedule. So we don't even ask them to fill that in anymore. I can sit down or have an administrative assistant sit down and get everybody's schedule. We don't really write ahead. We just show up at the door. Sometimes it's me. We've never done anything as elegant as put the torch in something, but we do always give a piece of paper that gives the upcoming schedule. When is orientation, initiation dates, election dates, just so that you're handing them that. I suppose these days you give them a card with a QR code or something. And then sometimes if we have a membership committee that's really on the ball, they'll put a ribbon around it. But we always sit at pick and also make ribbons. So we do take a piece of gold and a piece of silver ribbon, and we just put a teeny tiny safety pin on it. And the students are told they're supposed to wear that until they replace it with their pin, which, I mean, my daughter's in a music honorary and it looks to me like they're walking around wearing ribbons. So I guess it's something that sororities and honoraries do, that you have a little, but let me tell you, those mortarboarders, even the cowboys out here, that ribbon stays on their backpack. They'll put it on, and they, even after initiate, they're wearing it. It's a badge of honor for them. So it doesn't have to be big, elaborate, and maybe, especially if you're not used to tapping in class, don't step on a class time. But as anticipation rises for it, it's a really great thing. Mizzou, I don't think we have any Mizzou people. Do we have Mizzou people at the conference? So I looked it up. ODK taps at Mizzou. So that other organizations like this sort of high level chosen organizations that tap, and they have great videos. I mean, they also have like spooky robes and stuff at their thing, but this, it's something people do recognize, and they recognize mortarboard as something that you've been chosen for, as well as sort of earned just with grades. It speaks to character. I always tell students I'm a Fulbright scholar and I was Phi Beta Kappa, and what people see on my resume is mortarboard, like that they connect to. So anyway, I think those all sound great, and when we finally sing, I'll let you know. I'm sorry if it got noisy.
And I appreciate your perspective as a faculty to not go on and during class time. So
yeah, that takes a,
that might be a good thing if you're doing that meeting at a flagpole with the whole group at once. You could unread it.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that's a good way. But I love the ribbon idea that they wear it until it gets replaced by the pin. And I think we have I don't know if we have other chapters that do that, but that's an easy, it doesn't cost much money.
Yeah, it's so cheap. I mean, it's just coming out of the rose box for a ribbon sometimes.
Yeah, and giving them something, right? Physically giving them something is always just really,
yeah,
really
to mark that, because we're not processing or putting on robes or calling them out or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, I tapped somebody during orchestra practice, so I didn't get much time. I walked in, I said, I need Megan now. And my own kid is like, her stand partner was like, what are you doing here? Get out of here. So, But it is
Well-
fun. So those of you who are new to it, faculty or students, and I'm a sucker for this stuff. So if somebody doesn't claim one, I go do it. I like doing it.
And
It's
there's
a good
also,
way to recruit apple polishing and future advisor support.
yeah. I was gonna say, and off of that, it's also a good way, you can always bring in honorary members as well. And so think about that, whether it's fall or spring or both, but honorary members don't have to pay any membership dues. And it's a great way to get more champions on your campus as well. And so I know we had University of Louisville tapped this fall, and they tapped their new president and a dean. And so, but they had told me in
Love
advance.
that.
And so I sent them each, we have a centennial history book of mortarboard. So kind of we put that in the mail to the honorary members, and then sent a couple of things. So there was a little bit more, they couldn't afford to do that for all the chapters, for all the members, but it left an impact, and then all of a sudden, if the president's like, I'm a mortarboard too, they're more likely to look out for the organization on campus. And so think strategically as to who are some key stakeholders that could be really good advocates, whether just a name or could be potential future advisors or people that are truly helping you to, push students your direction. I think they can play a couple of different roles, but I've noticed over the years, honorary members have gone down, and that's a great way to just get that exposure. Kaylee kept using the word exposure. Honorary members help with exposure.
Definitely.
Yeah, I had a really proactive group a few years ago who inducted their dean. So I had a whole bunch of business majors in the crowd, and they wanted to induct we'd done it for like community leaders and stuff like that. So they inducted their dean, and now he's our provost. So that made us like who knows, 5 years from now, who'll be your boss. Anyway, I'm gonna mute myself so I don't.
Oh, you're fine. Any other questions? I want to be cognizant of time, and we're a little bit past the hour. So Elizabeth, is your daughter junior, or what year is she? Is she going to be tapped soon?
She's a sophomore. And I have joked to my kids that whenever they go to college, they have to go to college with a mortarboard chapter, and then they have to be sure that they get nominated, because their whole lives they've been my +1. I mean, they've packed so many Better World Books recycle books boxes for mortarboard. They've come to initiation. My oldest especially was my +1 for it. She's my extrovert. She's been to multiple initiations. She's helped set up and tear down from things. And, so they're always like, you've already done all the service you need to do. But now she's on my campus, and I'm like, okay, how do we do this? Just, keep your grades up, kid. And let somebody nominate her. It's hard. She's in music, and the music majors are often already super busy. So it's that's a big deal for me, for diversity, and also diversity discipline to make sure. So I lost an advisor who got promoted out of the university from social sciences, but I've got a colleague there, and I joked if she liked to craft, she should come help us with roses, and so she's willing to come. We've got an engineer on now, so we always want our engineers to come be sociable, that kind of thing. So hopefully, and our diversity and our diversity and equity person on campus, the administrator, has really done a great job over COVID. She's done a fantastic job of building community. And so I just sat and watched like a program that they had released over on YouTube and last year, and I just wrote down every student's name, and then I went and looked up to see if they had if they were juniors and if they had the GPA for mortarboard, and I put all those names in for. But I think those people, you could also co-sponsor an event, even if it doesn't cost much money. That's what I would love to see mortarboard do more in general, because you have all those organizations represented already in your group. So, if somebody needs another $100 and you have it, or if they need to list multiple groups for an application for an outside grant to support something. I've had groups that want to do a whole 5K on their own, and I'm like, you can't, but listen, we'll help you support it and we'll work the event with you, we'll co-sponsor it. And then, so that's a way to get some visibility
Well,
without,
especially those organizations that have younger members, because you're both gaining visibility, but also creating a potential pipeline for future members from that organization you're working with. So yeah, we collaborate when you can with other groups.
good point. I love the idea of tapping your honorary person. I never thought to do that. Cool.
Well, I think everybody has our emails are on the website. So if you have follow-up questions, and I know, again, many of you are in Kaylee's section already, and Callie, I know you and I have exchanged a couple emails since you've submitted the CR. So Michaela, Micaiah, feel free to reach out with any questions you might have as well. And again, Dr. Clark, it was great to see you at conference, and I'm just grateful to you as an advisor. And I mean, it's a little bit earlier, but it's still your evening where you are. So thanks for taking some time out of your day to be here.
It's okay. I have a kid coming. My youngest is coming back from tennis. I have to go get him in half an hour. I'm still up working. I turned off the camera and put dinner on the table.